Japan is in turmoil. The legitimate emperor has been forced out of the capital and is now camped south of Kyoto, whereas a puppet emperor has been placed on the throne by the shogunate. Conflict is inevitable, and time will only tell what the consequences of this is. But for us, the tiny Oda clan, barely eking out an existence, it doesn't particularly matter. Today we'll be playing as the Oda clan and seeing if we can't just dominate all of Japan. Japan plays pretty weirdly with its clan system. To start with, we don't control territory, we control buildings inside of territory. If we look, Ashikaga of course controls all of this land, and we control, at the moment, 4 buildings within this specific location. But we don't even control the location fully. The powerful Shiba clan is the one that's actually in control of this location, and making the majority of the income from it, due to controlling the governorship building. So first things first, our government status. As you can see, we only have 2 estates currently, the very powerful nobility with 77 power, and then a very weak peasantry with only 3. The power of our states doesn't particularly matter, at least at this point. We start with a government reform, the Japanese clan, that massively increases the amount of tax the nobles pay. So even with their very large power, they're still going to be paying us a little bit. And a lot of these privileges don't particularly affect us. There are ones we want to get rid of though before we transition into being an actual landed nation, like this banal lordship. We'll have to see whether we can bring the cost down enough. Currently costing us 200 stability to revoke anything. We of course do have the peasantry, who we can hand privileges out to, but it won't benefit us that much, even increasing peasant enfranchisement, because we're not really getting anything from peasant enfranchisement, I don't think, because we don't even control locations. But we do start with 2 potential government reforms we can hand out. We're going to hand out Trade Office Network, because this reduces the cost of building foreign buildings, and all of the buildings we're going to be able to build for the foreseeable future are built in Ashikaga's territory, and so count as foreign buildings. So if we look at a building, say right now, this one cost 50 ducats. Once we apply this government reform, it will be vastly reduced. So we'll grab that to start with. For our next one, I think we'll just grab the autocratic government reform, just to strengthen our crown power a little. Since our crown is the main thing opposing the nobility, there's not much reason to not increase them. Then we have 2 laws that we can hand out. First, we have the examination system. The obvious thing to do here is grab the continuous operation for the extra cabinet seat. But we don't actually have much we can do with our cabinet seats, as you can imagine. Because we're not a landed nation, we only have 4 interactions we could potentially do. So an extra cabinet seat isn't as overwhelming as it might normally be. But we're going to grab it anyway. I do think abolishing the examination system could be quite nice. Just for the extra buff to noble satisfaction, a +10 is definitely nice. But I don't think we'll have any problems keeping them happy, especially because of all the privileges they have. So we'll grab continued operations. Next we have our censorship law. I would love to hand out no censorship here for the buff to innovativism and humanism, so that we can get closer to revoking those noble privileges if possible, and just because communalism is all round great. So we won't be going for no censorship to start with, but we'll likely switch to it in the future. So for now we'll just go with limited censorship. When it comes to privileges, there isn't really anything we want to really hand out. The nobles already have an immense amount of privileges, and even if we wanted to hand out more, which I kind of do, I don't really want to empower them any further. For the peasantry, increasing peasant enfranchisement, as we've discussed, doesn't really benefit us, but we're going to hand out 2. We're going to hand out access to ecclesiarchal courts for the extra push to communalism, and we'll hand out communal land just to weaken the nobles a little bit. It's not going to have a big impact, but anything that weakens them is a little helpful, right? Now, for diplomacy, our first order of business is actually to get positive relationships with Ashikaga. Because we're going to be building buildings in their territory, we need them to like us. If we look right now and say try to build a building in our one location, you can see because their opinion of us is not 100, we are simply not allowed to build anything within their territory. So we're going to work on befriending them. Luckily, it's not going to be too difficult. We are going to try and get an alliance. Because we're very weak, it's going to be hard for us to expand. If we can get the Ashikaga to favour us and ally with us, we may be able to get some early expansion in. On that note, our first target is going to be the small, but rather influential Toki clan, perhaps Toki or Tokai. Either way, they will be our first target, so we'll begin building a spy network on them. When it comes to our economy, as established, we don't really have much of one. Nearly all of our income is going to come from building buildings. As you can see, each of the buildings we build gives a lump sum amount of money towards the owner, that being us. So taxation and other things aren't really things we're going to concern ourselves with, at least in this early period until we become a real nation. So instead, we're just going to try and spam buildings everywhere. We're going to max our cost of court, our diplomatic spending, and our stability spending simply because they're all so cheap. Because our nation barely exists, it's very cheap for us to expand all these things, at least for the moment. When it comes to religion, as a follower of Shintoism, we have two different modifiers. We have purity and honor. Both kind of feed into each other. At high purity, we gain honor, and at low purity, we lose honor. And then on the flip side, at high honor, we gain purity, and at low honor, we lose purity. We can also see there's extra modifiers from having low and high purity. The peasants really love having low purity and low honor. We could get a whopping 40% happiness for the peasants just from having both of these things set to low. It will upset the nobility though, and as you probably know, making the nobles happier is often more valuable than making the peasants happy. When it comes to honor, we can actively spend it within our Shintoism system for various bonuses. There used to be a very broken option here to demand payment from the shogunate, but I believe they've nerfed it now, so we only get a few ducats as opposed to the thousands we could get in previous versions, which is probably a good idea. When we get 100 honor, we also have the option to ask the emperor to allow us to usurp the shogunate, as well as a bunch of other options like increasing our levy size, increasing tax income, appeasing the estates. I especially like this increased literacy option, which increases max literacy and increases literacy gain. It's very hard to get literacy gain in the game, so having access to the option of getting it is always nice. But for now, it's going to be quite difficult for us to gain any honor. Purity decreases by 1 a month due to our starting low honor, and we need to get it up to 75 to start actually gaining honor, which can be quite difficult. We do have a bunch of options we can do to increase our honor. We can go on pilgrimages, we can do cleansing rites where we sacrifice prestige. We can click this over and over again, so if we really stack up prestige, we can just keep pressing this until we have enough purity. Then we can sacrifice works of arts to the god for a 20 purity, and finally we have the option to throw our ruler onto the flame for a whopping 30 purity, but at the cost of 50 stability. I'm actually thinking of doing this. Our starting ruler is very old, he's 67, so he's likely going to die fairly quickly, and because we don't really control any land, stability isn't as valuable to us, and because we're maxing our stability spending, we're actually going to gain it quite quickly. So I think what we're going to do is we're just going to have him shed his mortal coil, pushing us up to 79 purity and letting his much more talented son take the throne. Then we'll do a cleansing ritual, spend all of our prestige to get us up to 84. That's going to give us a little bit of honor gain a month. Hopefully we can keep pushing it above the 75 so we gain honor until our honor is high enough that we no longer lose honor. This monthly purity loss is going to decrease as our honor gets higher. We can also go on a pilgrimage. I'm a little hesitant to right now because we don't really have much money and a random event could very easily put us in the red. Then we're just going to slap our peasants for the 20 stability and it's as if nothing happened. We're back to 0 or 0.14. As discussed, the Toki are our first goal, so we're going to set them as our rival. Unfortunately, setting rivals is quite difficult in Japan because it just shows ashikaga, so we have to search for them in the list. Luckily, it's not too difficult. For research, we actually have quite a few options available to us, being Shinto, but also being part of the Buddhist group. One of the first things I'd like to do is complete this research option because it allows us to invest in culture, which is one of the ways we can get prestige. And depending on our purity situation, it'll be nice to have more prestige just to translate into purity. And then for our cabinet seats, as discussed, we're going to have one start pushing communalism. It's going to be quite hard to push communalism early simply because we don't have many sources of it. So once we've pushed it as high as we can, we'll likely flip to something else and start pushing that up instead. For our next cabinet seat, we'll just strengthen the government to get our legitimacy up as high as possible. And with that, I think we're ready to unpause. A situation is going to begin in Japan pretty quickly after we unpause, but it'll also end pretty quickly because it's kind of broken. I won't dwell on it much. I'll mention it when it happens and then we'll quickly move on. Here we can see the situation has began, the conflict between the emperor and the puppet emperor of the shogunate. We'll stay firm in our position because that will give us prestige and not cost us anything. Unfortunately, this situation is going to end fairly quickly. I'd give it around, let's say, half a year. The problem is the legitimate emperor will get an event that has him declare war on the puppet emperor. Unfortunately, said puppet emperor is allied with the ashikaga and so will immediately win, ending things pretty unclimactically. We can get access to a unique CB from this conflict, but as I said, it's going to be very short-lived, so we won't really think about it. We have a big enough spy network that we can begin fabricating a CB on the Toki. Unfortunately, we have to use the destroy enemy and destroy threatening rival CBs. We're going to get access to a new CB once this disaster ends. In fact, it's going to end in a few moments. Yes, we can just see the legitimate emperor was just annexed. I probably should have waited before building the CB that we're currently building, because the disaster will now end, as we can see. Peace and stability at last. I think it lasts a little longer than I said it would, but as you can see, a very short-lived situation. Maybe one day it will improve to the point where it doesn't end so rapidly. We've managed to ally Ashikaga just as planned. It's going to put us a bit over our diplomatic capacity, but that's not a big deal. Our government reforms and laws are in place. So now if we look at building a building, say in our capital, the base price is 50 ducats. But due to that government reform, our ruler's admin, the development of the location, and then the price of the goods, the price drops down to just 21 ducats. Pretty cheap when you think about it. Less than half of the original price. Now, we're very weak. We have around 148 levies. We're definitely not going to have an easy time fighting the Toki. It might actually not be viable for us to fight them. One of the things we'll try to do is sabotage Ashikaga's opinion of them. If we can use Ashikaga to essentially just win the war for us. It can be awkward though. Everyone will be working to improve their opinion of Ashikaga. Ashikaga does have some rivals though amongst the clans, which makes those clans good targets, because if we declare war on them, Ashikaga will likely join us and we'll win the war instantly, essentially, because all of the clans exist within Ashikaga's territory, and so we'll be full occupied the moment we start war. So we'll keep an eye on who is rivaled with Ashikaga and start building spy networks on them and fabricating CVs on them to see if we can't destroy them instantly. Unfortunately, a lot of clans have the same idea, so the people that Ashikaga's rivaled with are kind of going to be in flux because they're going to disappear quite quickly. We have our first parliament though. There's a few things we'd like to pass law-wise, so we're going to go for something the nobles like. As the Japanese, we have access to a unique marriage law that allows our rulers to have 4 wives, which means they can really pump out the children. So we'd definitely like to pass that as soon as possible. We're also set to favour the ruler for our distribution of power. Normally, I would just immediately favour the elite, but since the majority of our money isn't going to be coming through taxation, we're actually not going to do this just yet. We can always flip over in the future, right, when we need to, and we will likely need to once we eventually become a real nation. But for now, it's better to keep our crown power as high as possible. We've researched the option that lets us invest in culture, so we're going to begin doing that as much as possible. Our purity has, of course, fallen down just to 57. In fact, let's go on a pilgrimage right now, just to give us a little buff. That's not quite as high as we need it to be. Hopefully we get some events that give us prestige, because we can immediately just turn that prestige into purity. So now we have our CB on the Toki. Let's sabotage their relationship with Ashikaga. Will that be enough to bring Ashikaga in? It doesn't look like it. It's not too far away. If the Ashikaga could improve their bad stability, low power, and levy availability, they'd be willing to join. Unfortunately, we're not in control whether the AI properly manages its nation, so we may not be able to jump on the Toki for the foreseeable future, sadly. But we'll begin working on other nations that the Ashikaga don't like, even if they're miles away from us. Control doesn't matter at this point because we don't exist. So there isn't a problem with just having our lands be very decentralized. We've also gained access to a new CB now that that situation's over, the Expand Clan Authority CB. This CB is pretty good because it's made very quickly and it reduces the cost of taking land. Not that we're going to be taking land, right? Because of how conflicts work within Japan, we don't actually take territory. We steal buildings from people. We have our first CB against a weaker nation. They only have 81 levies, and luckily Ashikaga hates them, so we'll call them into the war. This results in us immediately winning the war, as we can see here through occupations and blockades. We simply need to wait a month for our diplomat to return, and then we can make peace. So when it comes to actually taking land, we don't take land. Instead, we choose these options to expand our clan's influence in the location, which will give us control of this clan's buildings in the locations they are currently in. We can also humiliate them, grab some money from them, ask for war reparations, I guess. Chances are they're going to cease to exist once we've committed all of these actions though. Once they lose all of their buildings, clans tend to die. Sometimes they end up surviving though, let's see. Nope, these guys have been destroyed. The first clan we have successfully destroyed. Excellent. Also excellent because it means Ashikaga will pick a new rival from amongst the Japanese clans, who we can begin attacking in the same way. But all in all, this is why I consider Japan quite a boring nation to play in, because we're just going to sit back, build buildings, kill Japanese clans, and wait to reach the 14th century. We aren't really going to get up to any mischief or do anything strange, at least for the moment. Just going to declare war and essentially immediately win because we're allied with the Ashikaga, and then move on to the next war once that's done. For the moment, we're going to be relying on the Ashikaga, but once we're strong enough, we can start thinking about attacking nations that aren't rivaled with the Ashikaga. We're going to fight this tiny clan here just so I can show off how fighting wars works as a Japanese clan. Because we don't control territory, we of course don't siege anything down. We can freely just walk through Japan to reach each other. Then once we reach each other, we of course fight. And then in the UI, there's this tiny button here to raid clan holdings. This gives us money, manpower, and more importantly, war score against the nation we're at war with. And that's the main way we actually get war score in these wars outside of battles. A strange system, I know, but it is what it is. Taking these lands does of course result in antagonism, but due to being friendly with the Ashikaga, we don't really need to worry about anyone trying to attack us. As the Ashikaga is our ally, they will protect us. So if another Japanese clan did try to attack us, they'd be pretty foolish, honestly. One other thing I'd like to do is switch out our succession law. Now that we've built up quite a bank of stability, we're going to switch over to the favoured son succession law. Because our rulers are going to have a lot of wives, they're also going to have a lot of children. Too many children for me to really manage. So I'd like the best possible child to come out of all of it as our rulers. We'll likely stick with this succession law for the entire game. Currently we're working on building as many buildings as we can. As you can see, our levies have grown to around 600. Not enough for us to eclipse the Toki yet, but we're getting there. Every building we build increases the amount of levies we can call on because it increases our population, because we employ people at those buildings. We could, if we wanted to, try to build a landed army. It'd be a tad too expensive right now, but it's definitely viable because a lot of our buildings provide us with manpower. Personally though, I kind of hold off doing so. Why? Because once we transition into being a landed clan, we'll lose a lot of the manpower sources and the income sources that we currently have access to, because all of our buildings are going to explode when we become a landed clan. So if we invest too much in the size of our military, chances are we won't be able to maintain it once the Sengoku Jidai happens. Our army has reached 1,000, so I think we're at a point where we can strike down the Toki alone without the Ashikaga. The game thinks we're slightly weaker, but I'm not sure I agree. Although actually, do they have any regulars? No, they don't, so it should just be just fine. We'll declare war, call up our meager amount of soldiers. Hypothetically, we don't really need to fight them. We could just walk into their land, burn down their buildings. We're going to fight them, of course, and we just eliminate them straight up. We'll then walk around and burn down all of their buildings, just because why not? Then we'll demand all of their clan holdings. This is quite a big war and is going to result in us getting a lot of clan holdings, which is of course exactly what we're looking for. The Toki are destroyed. We now control the central locations. For some reason the colour hasn't changed there. There we go. Nice red to represent our Oda Clan. With that, we're close to 2,000 levies. We've really reached the point where I think we don't need to rely on the Ashikaga anymore. I think this actually makes us the strongest clan in the nation, though it's quite hard to tell. Maybe not. There's a few of them roaming around with 1,000 or so men. Yeah, the Hosokawa here with 5,000 are definitely the strongest. Either way, we'll continue eating the clans. We want to destroy as many of them as we can before the Sengoku Jidai happens, because once the Sengoku Jidai happens, we'll have to start coring territory like a normal nation would. So all the land we can gather without having to bother with coring is of course helpful. We'd like to get away with doing as little coring as possible, right? There we go, we've managed to gain access to the clerical estate by building a certain building, specifically the family shrine. You can only build it in some locations, but once it's built it gives us access to the clergy. So we're going to immediately hand out enforced religious unity. I guess we'll hand out expansionist zealotry. It won't mean anything to us right now, but when we eventually go to war with other religions it'll be useful. We'll also hand out religious administration and strengthen the faith. That'll give us quite a push towards communalism, which we'll take advantage of to get up to 55. As time goes on, we're going to encounter more and more clans that are in marriage unions or just straight up unions. These can be a bit annoying, but also beneficial. They're beneficial because we can obviously make peace with the union and demand land from all of its members instead of just the single nation. But it can be annoying because the nations that are in these unions tend to not die when you take all of their territory. For whatever reason, being a member of a union seems to result in them surviving quite a bit, even when you take as much land as you can from them. You can see there, only one clan was destroyed that was in the marriage union. I'm not sure I can find the nation again. Yes, here we go. So the two clans that were members of the unions but weren't the leader, both of them are still alive. Even though you can see the stripe because we've taken a lot of their territory in the location, but because they weren't the war leader, they haven't lost all of their territory. And we, of course, have a truce with them now, so we can't attack them again, which is annoying. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can really do about it because the clans all tend to intermarry each other and form all sorts of unions, both marriage unions and the typical ones. So we just need to take it in stride, really. At the very least, it's a good way for us to take a lot of buildings all at once without much fanfare. We've murdered enough clans that we can now rank up to being a duchy. I don't think there's a reason not to. Still do just that, become a duchy. We can see we control quite a bit of territory now. We're still not quite as strong as the Hosokawa. We're getting close though. Eventually we'll eclipse them. We've boosted our communalism as high as we can under the current circumstances. So I'm thinking about revoking a privilege from the nobility. It's going to cost us a lot of stability. It's going to make them unhappy, but we've driven down the price as much as we can, really. The question is, of course, what to revoke. The fortification licenses increases their power the most, and we want to get rid of it. But banal lordships here is the worst one because it decreases our max control in locations. Of course, we don't have max control currently, and we're not going to have any control for another 50 or so years, so I think we are going to go for fortification licenses. I'm not a big fort enjoyer anyway, and since it increases their power the most, it's probably the most beneficial to revoke it. We'll see if it actually ends up having an impact. Yeah, we can see they lost 2% power. Not an amazing amount, but every bit of power we can scrape away from the nobility is a bit of power saved, right? We'll see about appeasing them. I don't even think they can revolt because they have nowhere to revolt in this situation, but we'd like them to be happy if possible. Something funny that's also happened is the ashikaga have become the Takeda shogunate. This isn't because the Takeda have taken over the country, it's simply because the ruler of the ashikaga shogunate is now a member of the Takeda dynasty. And in fact, the Takeda are going to lose the throne again to this Tako dynasty because that is who the current ruler, who is a woman as well, is married to. Clans in Japan have this sort of dynamic naming system where you can have multiple clans all with the same name if a family gets onto the throne of said clan, which is kind of funny but also kind of weird. But I guess it's just a thing that can happen. We're definitely the strongest clan in Japan now, though, with nearly 10,000 levies, so there's no reason for us to hold back. I'd really like to carve out a power base for ourselves in the centre of the country to give us something to work with. It's all well and good being rather spread out as we are with our location control, but when we do transition into being a real country, of course control will start to become a problem because that will become something we actually have to think about, as opposed to right now where we don't think about anything other than just killing essentially, just like a real samurai. Another thing I'm going to begin thinking about is not building any more buildings. As discussed, our buildings are great, they give us money, they give us manpower, they give us soldiers, but once we become a landed nation, they're all going to just vanish. So instead of building more buildings, I'm thinking we begin saving up money for the eventual transition into a real nation, so that when we do become a real nation, we have a bank to do things with, as opposed to having lots of buildings that will no longer exist. I definitely know which of those two things I prefer. The burghers have also showed up in our nation, all 10 of them, so we'll begin handing out privileges to them. No real reason not to. The burghers are always nice and helpful and provide many benefits to our nation. Handing out all these privileges will upset the nobility, but I'm sure they can stomach it. One really annoying thing about fighting in Japan is we can't control where our army spawns, so it's entirely possible our army spawns halfway across the nation. Luckily, it's not too bad because we can just, walk. But it is annoying just not having control of where our army's going to be when a war happens, which often leads to being caught out of position because we're just so far away. But again, because our enemies don't really do anything, it's not the end of the world or that big of a deal. You'll have probably noticed that my honor and purity have dropped down to 0. It was almost impossible to keep them up. One thing I am doing is stockpiling random art pieces so that we can rush up to the 100 purity. Maybe it's actually time now. Let's count. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. So we've got about 14 purities worth of art pieces that we could just destroy to get us up to 100 purity. We could then spend prestige, go on pilgrimages. I'm not sure if we have quite enough though. We're going to try it though. We're going to try it. Who's to stop us? So there, our purity is at 100. our honor will tick up quite rapidly now. And luckily, as our honor goes up, the amount our purity goes down decreases. We just need to get above that threshold. Easier said than done though, but with our prestige, and we have quite high prestige income at the moment, due to the various factors. The fact the nobles aren't very happy though is a negative that's pushing us down. We're working on that though. I'm quite confident we're going to be able to get up to a point where purity no longer decays. And there, our purity no longer decays, so our purity is going to stay at 100% now. Because it's going to stay at 100%, our honor will increase to 100%. Then we can start thinking about using it for various things. As long as it stays above 25, it won't lead to purity decay, so I'll mentally set that as our cutoff point. Speaking of mental cutoff points, we've gotten our stability quite high. We're at 62 right now. Can we actually slap the peasantry? We can't quite slap the peasantry. It's going to be later this year though, in December. So I'm thinking we revoke another privilege from the nobles. This time it's going to be in banal lordship. No reason to let them keep that. As I said, at the end of the year in December, we'll slap the peasants for the extra stability to mitigate the loss. Our honours ticked up to 100%, so we can think about spending it. As discussed before, one of the things we could do is try and seize the shogunate for ourselves. Despite the fact we have 20,000 levies, the shogun has nearly 40,000, so I don't think it's worth attempting. We'll probably try and seize the shogunate as soon as we can after the Sengoku Jidai triggers though. Instead, we could just extract money directly from the shogun. He's not going to like it, but I don't think we care if he likes it or not. As discussed before, we are just focusing on kind of building a bank economically in preparation for the Sengoku Jidai, as we're likely going to invest quite a bit in our locations once that eventually triggers. We're getting close to the start of the Sengoku Jidai, 18 years left. So I think we're going to revoke the last privilege from the nobility we'll revoke before it. Only nobility as leaders. We'll revoke that. That'll upset them. When the nobles cry, I can only really kind of shrug in indifference. I don't particularly care. As you can see, we've taken over a lot of the country, but there's always more. So we'll continue fighting and declaring wars up until the final moments to see if we can bring as much of the country under our control as possible. After all, every bit of territory we take, every clan we destroy, is one we won't have to destroy when we all turn into real nations. The real thing I'm concerned about is coring. As you can imagine, we're going to need to core a lot of land in Japan, so having it become part of me early means we won't need to core it when the time does come. Right, we're about 5 years out of the start of the Sengoku Jidai. As you can see, we've cut a rather bloody sway across Japan. We've destroyed a lot of clans. How many are there left? 91 by the looks of things, one of those being the shogun, so about 90. It's hard to say how many we've actually killed because I think there are some clans that spawn as well as time goes on, but we've killed a lot. Hopefully we'll get round to killing the rest once we enter into the Sengoku Jidai. I'm not sure, or at least I don't think, that we're going to be able to fit in another war before it starts, so we'll begin thinking about it starting. I've built up quite a bank, around 200k, so we shouldn't have too many problems just building things when we take over. Hopefully the country isn't in such a dreadful state that we find ourselves being almost bankrupt by the poor state of things. We're definitely going to lose the 90 or so income we have from our buildings, so our income's likely to drop a lot lower. To be fair, we are max spending on diplomacy for the moment. For example, we could just bring that down, and now we're in a much more comfortable position when it comes to income. It is hard to say what the situation will look like though. Speaking of which, let's try and fit in this one last war to see if we can't just destroy / take more land from the last few remaining clans. As with most wars that we've fought so far, it should be very quick and very simple. And there we go, we managed to destroy another clan, bring us down to 90. I'm thinking about where we want our capital to be for our Japan, and I am thinking it's going to be in Osaka. Osaka's quite a good location when it comes to harbour capacity. In fact, let me just check right now, is there anywhere better? I don't think there's anywhere better per se. There is one location that's about the same, but I like Osaka as a capital for thematic reasons. It was Hideyoshi Toyotomi's capital after all, and more because of its central location, being really close to Kyoto as well. I'll never acknowledge Edo as Japan's capital. This is a Western Army Toyotomi channel after all. And here we go. The Sengoku Jidai has begun. How much land did we gain? Well, we can see that we control around 122 locations. A respectable amount, I'd say. Slightly less than the Takeda control. Or, I say Takeda, but they are the ashikaga, just with a name change. The real Takeda are over here. Either way, let's take stock before we think about unpausing. First of all, it looks like we've gotten hundreds or so of forts. Did the ashikaga build a fort in every location? It kind of looks like it. Let's actually look at the fort map mode. Yeah, there's a lot of forts. I don't know though, maybe these spawned. These could have spawned when we became an actual nation. I'm genuinely not sure. But yes, we're going to switch out our old government reform, the clan one, for this new daimyo reform. It increases the amount of noble levies we have and their estate satisfaction, but as you can see, it doesn't increase the amount of tax they pay. So that's something we'll need to think about. First things first, let's see about getting our economy in order by demolishing a few hundred of these forts. I say forts, but they're not really forts, they're just stockades mainly. We'll just demolish a bunch of them, not all. It might be helpful to have a few. I'd like to get under my fort limit though. There we go. I'm not sure if the amount of money we're making right now is accurate, or whether it's going to jump up and down once we unpause. Let's begin pushing towards a naval. Now that we actually have land, we could think about building a navy. Since the Ashikaga ended their alliance with us, there's nothing really stopping us attacking them. We could go and grab the action that lets us seize the shogunate. I'm not sure, could we beat them in a straight up 1v1 right now? That's the question, right? I think let's let time pass a little before we do anything outlandish. We want to see what our economy looks like. Well, at the very least, we are making money. We could do with increasing the satisfaction of the nobles a little more so we can get more tax out of them. To be fair, I did pass a parliament-approved taxation before the Sengoku Jidai happened, and that's inflating the amount of money we're getting from them. You can see we still have a little bit of income from buildings. These are the few buildings we had, which are now within locations that didn't end up switching over to our control. This location, for example, we can see our buildings are there. So we will at the very least still get a little trickle of income from buildings like that. Maybe we should build a large standing army just so that we can sweep the island. It might have been smarter to do that before the Sengoku Jidai started, when we had massive amounts of income. There's going to be a bit of a cut here because I committed the usual sin of pausing my recording, coming back, forgetting to unpause it. I was filled with so much bloodlust towards the Ashikaga that instead I killed them. Well, not killed them, they do still exist, but they have been regulated to a daimyo now. They've been demoted. We are now the shogun, the Oda shogunate, which has elevated us up to an empire as well. This has resulted in a lot of antagonism, but that was my intention. I actually want as many of the Japanese clans as possible to kind of form a coalition against me, because then I can wipe them out, perhaps in a single conflict. I'm about to attack into the current coalition. We could let it grow larger, but it looks pretty big already. There is a risk with letting it grow too large, of course. Currently it says they're slightly stronger than us, but you got to remember they are of course divided and not a unified force. This nation here is probably the strongest one with 5,000 men under their belt, but we'll declare war, raise the boys, hopefully. Well, I mean, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. We've just got to be proactive and smart. Two things that are probably not as simple as we let on. We'll see about full annexing as many of the nations that have dared to defy us as we possibly can. If we truly end up in a bad situation, we could just surrender-ish and give the coalition something, probably just war reparations, let them humiliate us, stuff like that. We could use our very large bank to call up mercenaries if we need to. That would, of course, help even the playing field. I'm not sure we particularly need to even the playing field though. As long as they don't bring all of their armies together into one force, they can't really stop us. And let's be real, the AI usually isn't smart enough to bring their whole army into one big force. We can see they're running into our 10,000 with their 4,000, resulting in them getting 100% stack wiped. So I doubt very much that they will be able to threaten us. Another coalition is forming behind this, but again, that is kind of what we want. Another coalition to immediately attack once we're done with this coalition. The leader of the coalition has capitulated, so we'll start annexing people if we can. As I said, I'd like to annex all of them if possible, but it's probably going to require quite a bit of sieging to get them all down, because everyone is forted up. Another thing of note is we actually have quite a few cores on locations. It looks like everywhere that we had a building in when the Sengoku Jidai began has become our core territory, even if we didn't actually take the province. So we can luckily just demand that some of these nations return their cores to us instead of having to outright annex their territory. And of course, it is easier to integrate it into our lands because it's already our cores. Nice and simple, right? We also have an option to reduce the autonomy and turn these clans back into building-based nations. I don't think that's a good idea, though. I think it's better to just destroy them. If we turn them back into building-based nations, there's all sorts of risks. They could, of course, continue to attack us. They could join coalitions against us. It looks like there are some events that lead the building-based nations to revolt and take territory from us, all things we don't really want to deal with. I'd rather just kill them and move on. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Since we're a real country now, we're going to do what I previously mentioned and switch over from favouring the ruler, our current distribution of power, and instead favour the wealthy for the extra 10% tax. No real reason not to. It's going to be hard for us to increase our crown power now that we're so large, especially once we encompass all of Japan. So we might as well benefit if our crown power is going to be low by ensuring the nobility actually pay taxes. One of those things that's always hard to achieve, but nice when you do achieve it. And there we go, we've done enough damage to the rebels that we can now annex them, so we'll do just that. Take some money, take all of their territory, destroy a bunch of clans, as it should be. There's currently how many? 67 clans left within the land. Still too many for my liking, so we'll work on another group. We did take Osaka in that war, so we're now going to move our capital there. It's definitely appropriate as our nation's capital, so we'll let it fulfill the role. Alright, let's strike at another coalition. The strongest nation in this one is Hosokawa. They're definitely a nation we'd like to take land from. It's a little slow going because I have to wait for the clans to actually decide to form a coalition, and as you can imagine, they're actually quite hesitant to form a coalition most of the time. Alright, that's this coalition done. How many people are left? Can't be that many now. 51. How many of these are actually, unlanded ones as well? It's hard to know. I can't really tell just from looking. It definitely looks like there's not much left in the nation. Maybe we can get them with one more war. If they form another coalition against us that includes most of them, the problem really is going to be Ashikaga / Takeda. They're the big one that's probably going to take a while to take land from. One of the funny thing is we actually have a tiny little Oda branch, which it also hates us here, the domain of the Oda, over on that little island north of Japan. No, not Hokkaido, the other one that I can't remember the name of. We're actually doing much better at coring all this land than I thought we would. I mean, I know it doesn't look very good just looking at it, right? We're not really having any problems with rebellions because everyone's already of an accepted culture. The good old brother cultures. So it really is just a matter of slowly but surely integrating them. To add on to that, we have quite high cabinet efficiency. And with 4 cabinet seats, I think we're doing quite well. Once we fully unify the island, we can pretty freely just absorb everyone there is left. There are some of these clans that don't have any land that exist, and we have the option to kind of revoke their territory, which I suppose we should just do. If we can destroy them by just having them give up their territory, that would be great. Don't really want to get stabbed in the back by these untrustworthy, should we say, daimyo. After all, they'll do to us what we did to the original shogun. Right, third war against a coalition. These guys are actually bringing in the Ainu, who aren't landed either. So I suppose we'll see if we can destroy them. And those pirates to the south on their little island. I'd love to destroy them just to get rid of the events related to them randomly pillaging us all the time. I probably won't bother trying to get over to them. I imagine they have quite a strong navy. It'd be surprising if they didn't. But instead of getting over to them, we could just capitulate the coalition and take their land that way. And there we go, another coalition defeated. I was going to take the lands of these pirate people, but for whatever reason I'm not allowed to demand it. Even though I can demand the land of other people who I haven't occupied the land of. For example, this location here, which has not been occupied by me, I can demand it, but I can't demand this one. Not sure why. Maybe it's because I haven't physically gotten to it, but I'm not too bothered either way. We'll chop down another group of daimyos. Is there anyone left? There's this tiny domain here, and of course the Takeda, and this tiny nation here. But is that it? So 1, 2, 3, including Takeda. How do we actually end this situation? There needs to be less than 2 people in the Japanese shogunate, or there has to be 2 members in the Japanese shogunate with everyone either being a building-based country or my vassal or something like that. I guess we'll find out. When does our truce with the Takeda expire as well? 6 years, so it's going to be a little while before we can take any moves against them. But that's fine though, we can probably relax a little once we've dealt with the last of the clans. I'm going to build a local governor here in the Kanto area. I just need to make sure we're connecting over to Osaka. It does look like we are, but the game says we're not, so let's build a road. Looks like we need to build a road through those 3 locations because the road here didn't count. Oh, maybe there wasn't a road. Whatever, who cares? I'm sure the game will figure it out for me. Another thing that's going to become a problem is the lack of institutions. As you can imagine, we don't really have access to them over here. There is an ancient tactic that lets us get institutions through asking for fleet basing rights. You can see here it gives a little trickle of an institution, but we require people to actually have the institutions for that to work. If we look at the institution map mode, we can see no one that we're aware of has access to the institutions. So we're going to try and find them. We're going to start exploring the world. We're also going to start colonizing the world. In my mind, I've set a few goals of where I'd like to conquer and colonize. Much of Asia, of course, comes into our colonization. In fact, maybe we should just colonize everywhere. What are the downsides, right? Will be a tad expensive, but I'm sure we can sustain colonization. There, I think the only people left in Japan that still hold territory are us and Ashikaga, still called Takeda. I think they also have at least one vassal. Yeah, this guy here. I've also picked up a few vassals of my own. These are all just landless nations, though. I can't destroy them, I don't think. I can't integrate them, definitely. So what we'll probably do is just give them independence. Maybe we'll even block them from building buildings in our lands. Does blocking them from building buildings actually cause their buildings to be destroyed? Or do we need to do it manually? I know that if we have a negative opinion of the nation, or they have a negative opinion of us, I'm not sure which it is, we can destroy the buildings they have. Is there anyone we can test that on? Looks like these guys have buildings, but unfortunately they're not within our territory. Is there anyone who we have a negative opinion of? Doesn't really seem so. That's too bad. It might be hard for us to get negative opinions of these people. I guess we can just assign them as our rivals. That will probably be the best strategy. Assign them as our rivals, then destroy their buildings. Elsewhere, we can see Korea doing okay. They've actually subjugated Shenyang. Are they a vassal? Yeah, they are. The Manchurian tribes have had an unsuccessful run of it, though. A lot of them have just been subjugated by the Great Ming. We can see the noble horde here as well. But Yuan is still holding on. Far in the south and in the north, Yuan is still here, despite it all. And then we have a massive Ming, obviously. Of course, it's in the timeline where we play as Japan. We end up with a Ming with more than 1 million men in 1412, but we'll see about destroying them eventually. What we'll likely do is just build up a massive navy and try and fight them on the seas primarily. But to do that, we're going to need ships, and to get ships, we need tech. So we'll see about exploring the world first. I guess we could just go for a galley navy early. It may be worth it. I want to focus on unifying the islands before we think about pushing naval, though. One of the reasons for that is our high army tradition pushes us towards land. So what we'll likely do is we'll spend all of our army tradition and then just try and push towards naval. There's probably a few laws we can switch to as well that help us with naval. I can't quite remember now, but we'll see about that. We could also hand out the privileges to the nobility, like this one here, the noble navy. And we'll need to assign our ruler as an admiral. Unfortunately, he currently has a general trait, which is going to push us quite a lot towards land oversea. So we'll kind of need him to die and be replaced by somebody without a general trait. You know what, let's make one galley right now so that we can assign our future ruler to it in the hopes that he'll gain a trait. Let's also level up Osaka. It's currently a rural settlement. We'll turn it into a town. We of course want to begin setting up our future capital. For now though, I think we'll leave things here. Thank you for watching. I do hope you enjoyed this video. At the bare minimum, we've inadvertently saved Nobunaga from being murdered in 1582 by completely changing the timeline. But either way, I'll thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time.